Gemara says, well-known Gemara, many people are machmer to fulfill this Gemara. Chayav adam lefsumei beporia. A person is obligated to imbibe on Purim, to drink on Purim, Adalo yada ben orer Haman lebarach Mordechai, until they do not know the difference between cursed is Haman and blessed is Mordechai. And there are different interpretations what that shiur is. But first, it's very interesting to note that there are some Rishonim that specifically say we do not paskin like this Gemara, and the Gemara itself indicates that we are not to follow this, because right after we're told, Chayav Adam Lefsumei Beporia, the Gemara gives us the Maisa of Rabbi was inebriated, and Rabbi shechted, Rabbi slit the throat of Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera was dead. And when Rabbi realized what he did, he was mispalel, and there was Techiyas HaMesim. So the Meiri brings shitos that say that why does the Gemara give you that story? To indicate that one should not drink, because chas v'shalom, there can be dangers, God forbid, things could happen. On the other hand, other Rishonim are docha the raya, because the Gemara then goes on and says that when Rabbi invited Rabbi Zera to come back for next year, Rabbi Zera didn't want to come because Rabbi Zera said, Lav b'chol yema misrachish nisa. Just because a miracle happened this year, who knows if a miracle will happen next year? But if the pshat of the Maisa was not supposed to drink, so what is Rabbi Zera afraid of? Fakert, it's mashma that in spite of what Rabbi did with Rabbi Zera, there's still an inyan of Chayav Adam Lefsumei Beporia. So you can learn the Gemara two ways, but the Shulchan Aruch indeed does paskin Chayav Adam Lefsumei Beporia. But what is the significance of not knowing the difference between Orer Haman and Baruch Mordechai? The Ramah says, you drink until you need to go to sleep. When you're asleep, you don't know the difference, but that could be the same for any phrase. Others say the gematrias of the two phrases are the same. So when you can't add up the numbers that well, you've reached the shiur. They kind of make it a relatively small shiur. But to be masber this in a bit more amkus, let's be makdim with another kasha. The Gemara asks the kasha, we know that we recite Hallel on every Yom Tov, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, even for Chanukah, Reish Chodesh, at least mitam minhag we say Hallel, half Hallel, and we make a bracha. That is our minhag. And yet the Gemara asks the kasha, why don't I say Hallel for Purim? Chanukah is even after Purim. Chanukah is after the Zman of Nevuah. But the Chachamim saw it as a miracle of Hatzalah of Am Yisrael. We make Hallel. Kal v'chaymer Purim, where there was mamish, a gezerah, lahashmid, laharag, lahabed, every single Jew would have been wiped out. Why is there no Hallel, Kriyas HaHallel for Purim? So the Gemara gives no fewer than 3 terutzim. The first teretz the Gemara gives is Kriyasa Zuhi Lula. There is Hallel on Purim, but the Hallel that you read on Purim is not Hallel. The Hallel that you read on Purim is the Megillah. The Megillah itself is a fulfillment of the mitzvah of Hallel. In fact, some even want to say, there's a whole problem if I say Shechiyanu at the nighttime Megillah, and you normally make Shechiyanu the first time you do a mitzvah, because of the great simcha of the first time. Why do I make a Shechiyanu in the morning? And that's why we tell people, we say that in the morning you should have kavana to be mechavein, that your Shechiyanu covers not only Megillah reading, but also Mishloach Manos and Sudas Purim and Matanas Li'Evyainim. But still, that's not a complete answer. So why do I say it in Megillah reading? Why do I put my Shechiyanu in the Megillah reading? One answer, historically, might be the following. This is to digress a little bit. And that is, the Turi Even says that the original takana of the Anshe Knesses Hagdola, dating from the time of Mordechai and Esther, to read Megillah, was really only B'yom. B'yom was the Iker takana. There was no Megillah reading at night. In fact, in Maseches Seifrim, we actually read that Rabbi Meir was walking by a shul that was reading Megillah at night, and he said, why are they making so much noise? They're disturbing the neighborhood. It was a later takana, and perhaps it started as a minhag to also do it at night. But when they were misakin it at night and they put a shechiyanu in, they didn't want to remove the shechiyanu of the morning because they didn't want to interfere with the original takana of Anshe Knesset Agdela that Vadai had shechiyanu in the morning because that was the only Megillah that they read. But what do? If Lamaisa we added the night and we have a shechiyanu, the shechiyanu of the morning is going to be a bracha levatala, so we think of other things that it could cover. But its positioning there was the original shechiyanu for Kriyas HaMegillah, because that was the original chiyuv of Kriyas HaMegillah, and that is dafka b'yayim. That's why in the Mishnah itself, you actually don't have any direct reference to Kriyas HaMegillah at night. The first mention of Kriyas HaMegillah at night is a memra of Rav Yeshua ben Levi, Chayav Adam Likros HaMegillah v'lishneisa v'laylu v'yayim. And even though he has a pasuk, the Torah Yevon says the pasuk is an esmachta. But some want to say, going back to the Hallel issue, that the shechiyanu in the morning is going on the unique mitzvah of Hallel, which you didn't do at night. It's only in the day you do Hallel. Of course, there's a big question with that. We don't say shechiyanu on Hallel, but okay. But that's teretz number one. Kriyasa Zuhi Lula. The Mikra Megillah itself is a fulfillment of Hallel. Teretz number two, Ein Omrim Hallel al Neis Shebechutz La'aretz. We don't say Hallel on miracles that happen outside of Eretz Yisrael. The miracle of Purim was predominantly a miracle that happened in Chutz La'aretz. We don't say Hallel on Nisim Shebechutz La'aretz. The Gemara then immediately asks, what do you mean? Pesach, Yetzias Mitzrayim, that happened Chutz La'aretz. And yet, of course, we say Hallel. And the Gemara's answer is, until Klal Yisrael comes to Eretz Yisrael, then wherever Hashem saves us, we will say Hallel. But once we've come to Eretz Yisrael and we have been exiled, at that point, we don't say Hallel on Nisim Shebechutz La'aretz. That's the answer number two. And then the Gemara gives a teretz number three, that we only say Hallel when, as a result of the nes, we are no longer in that same danger. Once there's Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, Paro no longer threatens us. Here, the danger of being subject to Achashverosh we still faced. Yes, Haman got killed. Yes, we defeated our enemies, but Achashverosh is still king. We are still the avadim of Achashverosh. What if the next day he has another Haman or whatever it is? Akati, Avdei, Achashverosh, Anan. And that is why we don't say Hallel, because the miracle did not take us out of the sakana which we faced to begin with. So we have three terutzim why there is no Hallel. The Mikra Megillah is the Hallel, number one. Number two, we don't say Hallel, Al Neisha B'chutz La'aretz. And number three, Akati Avdei Achashverosh Anan, we were still in danger. Of those three reasons, the Shulchan Aruch only brings the first reason, that Mikra Megillah is Hallel, and that seems to be the Iker reason that we follow the halacha. Based on this, the Meiri, obviously before the Shulchan Aruch, has a very interesting halacha. The Meiri says, since really you're mechuyev in Hallel, but the only thing is Megillah takes the place of Hallel. So if a person is on a desert island, a person doesn't have a Megillah, but a person brought his siddur or has a Tehillim, the Meiri says he is mechuyev to read Hallel with a bracha on Purim, because it's Megillah that takes the place of Hallel. If you don't have a Megillah, you have to read Hallel with a bracha, full Hallel, as Ezak the Meiri. But the Poskim all say not like the Meiri. The Poskim all say that when the Gemara says Kriyasa Zuhi Ilula, that the Mikra Megillah is the Hallel, it doesn't only mean it is a substitution for Hallel, but it is the only way you can fulfill Hallel. On Purim, you can only fulfill Hallel through Megillah. You cannot fulfill Hallel through Hallel. That's difficult to understand. Why would something that is like Hallel be better than something that is Hallel? You can't fulfill Hallel with Hallel. You can only fulfill Hallel with Megillah. So Rav Hutner is masber in the Pachad Yitzchak that what is the chiyuv of Hallel? Hallel is to express hakaras hatayv, gratitude, shevach to the Ribbana Shel Olam, for the geulas, for the yeshuas, for the nisim, for the niflais that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives to us. So the form that your Hallel must take must correspond to the form that the miracle took. We know, of course, there are two types of miracles that happen. Pesach is the example of the Nes Nigla, open, obvious, supernatural, the 10 Makos, the Kriyas Yamsuf, the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu cannot be denied. It is so obvious, so clear, so pashut. That represents what we call a Nes Nigla. A Nes Nigla, we praise Hashem with a Hallel Galuya, an open Hallel. Hallelujah Hashem. But Purim, right, one of the most familiar ideas of Purim, is Purim represents a very different type of divine intervention. Every single aspect of the Purim story, if one is not a maimin in Hashem, one could have chalked it up to coincidence. Achashverosh kills his wife, his queen Vashti. That was done. Esther was chosen. Somebody had to be chosen. Mordechai overhears an assassination plot and is able to save the king. Haman decrees destruction on a nation that happens to be the queen's own nation, and he didn't know that because the queen did not reveal what her national identity was. Baruch Hashem, it all works together very, very nicely. But if one is not a maimin, one could chalk it up to coincidence. And even though that seems very implausible from our perspective, because we're reading a story that has been collapsed into a much shorter time frame, if you recognize that the story of Purim took place over a number of years, then things happen, right? People in the right place, the right time. And that is why the Svarim tell us the name of Hashem is not mentioned in Megillas Esther, because there is concealment. The very name Esther is a remez to Hashem interacting with this world in a very concealed and hidden way. That is why it is the type of Yeshua that we get in Chutz La'aretz during the 70 years of exile, when Golos by definition is a Zman of Hester Panim. But what is the Yesod of Purim? The Yesod of Purim is to see the loving presence of Hashem, to see the hashgacha over Am Yisrael, even when things are not supernatural, even when things are not Nes Nigla, even then when they're Hastara. And that is a higher level of perception, because it is so easy to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu when you have supernatural miracles. But it takes a much closer look to see the Yad Hashem in things that look like coincidence, look like mikra, look like happenstance, look like being in the right place, in the right time. That is the Yesod, the Achrayim say, of why many people have the minhag of disguises on Purim. Because what is a disguise? Then an external cover for an inner reality. What you see is not what you get. Appearances are deceiving. This is the Yesod of Hamantashen. Now, people today, we don't really have authentic Hamantashen. Authentic Hamantashen, the filling is supposed to be covered up. You're not supposed to know what it is that you're getting. People are spoiled. They're like this flavor, not that flavor, so now we have to show them what it is. But the whole idea of the Hamantashen is to be mechusa. Kreplach is the same thing, right? You have the inner and the outer. That this world is an outer appearance of a deeper reality. And that is the Yesod of Purim, to see Hashem in the Hester, see Hashem in the so-called happenstance. What you see is not what you get. Rav Hutner says, since Purim is the epitome of a nes nistar, the Hallel of Purim must praise Hashem in an indirect, hidden way. and hence Megillas Esther, which is a hidden expression of Shevach, because it does not even mention the Ribono Shel Olam by name. The Zohar says, when it says HaMelech, it's a remes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu also, as well as to Achashverosh. But that itself is Nister. In other words, Nes Nigla requires Hallel Galuya. Nes Nistar has a Hallel Misuteret, has a hidden and concealed Hallel. This is all about concealment. In fact, the famous Maimer Chazal, brought down in the Yalkut Shemaini, Kol HaMayadim B'Telim, all the Mayadim, all of the holidays, all the Yamim Tovim, are going to be Batel, except for Purim. One gersa is Chanukah and Purim, another gersa is only Purim. And this Maimer Chazal is an extraordinarily difficult Maimer Chazal, because on one level it seems to contradict one of the Yud Gimel Ikrei Emunah of the Rambam. I mean, what are Chazal saying? Are Chazal saying when Mashiach comes, we're not going to keep Pesach, we're not going to keep Shavuos, we're not going to keep Rosh Hashanah? Is that not a violation of the idea that every mitzvah of the Torah is eternal and will not be superseded? Now, Hagam in the Gemara itself, we do have a Man D'Amar Ben Zoma who does say one thing, that the mitzvah of daily remembering Yetzias Mitzrayim might be batel, because that gets superseded by the miracles of Mashiach, and that itself raises enormous problems with the Rambam Shita. But even Ben Zoma just picks that mitzvah. Ben Zoma's model l'chora, that Pesach will be kept, Korban Pesach, Matzah, right? He only mentions the daily mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim. So how can the Gemara, how can the Yalkut Shemaini assert that the Mayadim are going to be batel except for Purim? So there are a few explanations that are given. But the explanation of the Maral is probably the best known. And the Maral says like this. The Maral says that when it says the Moadim are going to be batel, it does not mean they're not going to be observed. We are certainly going to eat matzah on Pesach, and we're certainly not going to do malacha, and we're certainly going to hear shofar and sit in the sukkah and take lulav. The actual shemiras hamitzvos are not going to be batel, because they commemorate these vital historical events in Jewish history, and because they are the mitzvos of Hashem, they will never be batel. That's the yesod of the Rambam, that the Torah will not be batel. That was the primary argument against Christianity and Islam, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not supersede Matan Torah by another revelation. But when it says the Moed will be batel except for Purim, it means a certain teaching of the Moedim will no longer become necessary. The Moedim, b'derech klal, involve Nisim Galuyim, Yetzias Mitzrayim, Sukkos, Ananei HaKavod, Shavuos, the Nisim of Matan Torah. And we need those special supernatural miracles because we fail to see God in ordinary life, because there is so much concealment, so much hester. But Yemosa Mashiach, we will not need to learn of the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the supernatural miracles of those times, because we will understand on the day-to-day we will see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, the lesson of Purim, to see Hashem in day-to-day, that will be eternal. That lesson we will still absorb. We will not need the lesson of the Mayadim. So the Maral is learning, Avada, we will keep the Mayadim, they are mitzvahs. But the particular musag of hashgacha that you derive from the Mayadim, that's going to be batel, because it'll be the Hanaga of Purim, in which the Yad Hashem is seen, even in the Hester, of course. Then it'll be because it's not going to be Behester anymore. Right? So this is the aside of the Nes Nister. To take it a little further, because we're going to go back to the drinking, Chayv Adam Lefsume before you. If the Avodah is to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu's loving presence and intervention and his concern, even in the normal operation of daily life, there is even a deeper level of hasaga that one can achieve. And that is to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu's loving presence, even in adversity, even in sorrows, even in difficulty, even when things seem to be going in a very, very negative and frightening way. To understand that there's an inyan of Gamzu Latova, that even the Yisurim that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends to us are challenges to make us better, to make us greater, to open our hearts, to increase our compassion, to make us turn to Hashem with tefillah. And this you see from Purim itself. In the Hakdama, the Nesivos HaMishpat, who's known as the Nesivos, or the Chavastas, also wrote Perushim on the Megillas. A regular Mikros Gedolos will have the Perush of the Nesivos on Megillas Esther. And in the Hakdama, the Nesivos says the following idea. The Gemara says, or the Pasuk says, that when Haman went to Achashverosh and started saying that there is this nation that is Mefozer and Meforad, they're scattered, they're not unified, they don't keep the king's law, they have no respect for the king. Again, there's a double entendre. He's telling Achashverosh, they don't respect you, but in Shemayim there's a kitrug that they don't respect the Ribbon Shalom, that's the Melech. And Haman is a classical anti-Semite. He's saying whenever he asks a Jew to do something, or there's people to do something, it's not clear if he's identifying the people. They say it's Shabbos, they say it's Yom Tov, Shabbos Hayom, Pesach Hayom. If a fly goes into their cup of wine, they get rid of the fly and drink the wine. But if your majesty touches the wine, they have to throw it away. You're worse than an insect. And he offers Achashverosh 10,000 kikar kesef. A kikar is a huge amount. According to the Art Scroll Chumash, I see it is almost 60 pounds. 10,000 kikar. Huh? What? Is it kilos? Okay, so it's quite a lot. 10,000, unbelievable. But Achashverosh, in his generosity, says, you can do the job for free. I don't even need the money. Keep the money. So Achashverosh took off his ring, and he gave it to Haman, and that gave Haman the royal authority to kill the Jews. So the Gemara says, Gadol Hasaras Hatabas, the taking off of that ring did more good for the Jewish people than the 48 Nevi'im and the 48 Nevi'os. Because what do the Nevi'im say over and over and over again? Do tshuva, do tshuva, do tshuva. We don't listen. But when that ring goes to Haman, all of Klal Yisrael did tshuva. All of Klal Yisrael turned to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chazal say the Hasaras Hadabas was better than the 48 Nevi'im and the 7 Nevi'as. So the Nesivos says, when we think about the Yeshua of Purim, we think the only thing to be grateful for was that there was a threat against us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved us and our enemies did not destroy us. We would not think to be grateful for the Gezerah of Haman. The only thing we would think to be grateful for was that we were extricated from the Gezerah of Haman. But if that's so, all you are is back to square one. Before there was a Gezerah, we were safe and secure, at least as safe as you can be in Golus. And then there's this Gezerah that made things bad. And then, Baruch Hashem, Hashem takes us out of the Gezerah, and we're back where we started. But that's not at all the case. It's not simply we're back where we started. We became transformed. We changed because of that Gezerah of Haman. Gadol Hasaras Hatabas, Yosir Memchas Nevi'im. So, from an Olam Hazeh perspective, our lives were threatened. Now we're okay. We're grateful. But if one reaches a true level of simcha, a true level of emunah, one understands that I am grateful not only for the Baruch Mordechai, the Yeshua that was engineered by Mordechai, and also Esther, Brucha Esther, but even, not that I'm grateful to Haman, but even the Gezerah of Orur Haman, the Gezerah that the cursed Haman brought against us, is also a shirish of my hakaras hatayv, because I am makir, that even when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us yisurin, gives us challenges, gives us dangers, it is ultimately a mechanism to bring us closer to Him, to discover kaichais that we didn't know we had. And this, the Nesiva says, is the meaning of chayav adam livsume beporya, to reach a level of simcha. And indeed, this is what the Mishnah says in Brachos. Chayav adam levarech al hara kederech shu mevarech al hatayva. A person must make a blessing for the bad, just as they make a bracha for the good. The Gemara explains it is certainly not the same bracha for good tidings, hatova hametiv, for bad tidings, dayano emes. But the Gemara says we have to be makabel both, besimcha. Now, simcha doesn't mean a person dances on the table when something bad happens. Judaism recognizes the reality of tragedy, the reality of suffering. There is something called hilchos avelos. There are zamanim that are miyuchad libechi. There are times we're supposed to cry. But simcha in the Gemara means something deeper and more subtle. That even in my suffering, even in my anguish, even in my despondency, I know and I'm maimin that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has not abandoned us. That there are sometimes difficult lessons that we have to learn. There are sometimes very difficult and tragic matzavim that we have to go through. But ultimately, if we respond, if we grow, if we learn, if we do tshuva, then we will feel the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even in those difficulties. And therefore, the Hester of Purim, the Hastara of Purim, is not only in the fact that the Geula came in such a derech hateva type of way, but there's another level of Hastara that even in the adversity of the Oror Haman, you see a Geula, a message of Geula that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving you. And this is what the Gemara in Bracha says. On the Pasuk, the same sugya, Bayomahu Yiyah Hashem Echad Ishmuchad, right? V'hay Hashem L'melech al kol haaretz. Bayomahu Yiyah Hashem Echad Ushmo Echad. On that day, the day of Geula, the day of Mashiach, Hashem will be one, and His name will be one. And the question is, the Gemara asks, what do you mean, will be one? Hashem is one right now. And the Gemara's answer is that in Olam Hazeh, of course Hashem is one. But we perceive two opposite dimensions. Sometimes we see the midah of Rachamim, Hashem, and sometimes we see the midah of din and punishment and retribution, Elokim. It looks like there are two gods. Of course there's one God, but it's as if He's acting in two opposite ways. Bayomahu, at the end of this whole historical process, we will see Hashem as one, because we will understand that even the Midas Hadin of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was in fact an expression of a Rachamim. We needed to go through what we needed to go through to make us into the people that are worthy of being the Am Hashem. The Chassam Sofer says very similar. The Chassam Sofer says, when Moshe Rabbeinu, after the Cheder Egel, asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hareini nas kvodecha, hodieni nas rachacha, show me your ways, hodieni nas rachacha. And the Gemara in Brachos says that Moshe was actually asking Hashem, I don't understand the ways of divine justice and mercy. Why do tzaddikim suffer? And why do Rishayim prosper? It doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem just. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't really answer. I will be merciful to whomever I choose to be merciful. I will have compassion to those that I choose. You're not going to understand this. It's beyond you. But then the Torah says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, I'm putting you in the cleft of a rock, and I'm going to pass by, and I'll remove my hands. V'ra'isa es acharai, you will see me from the back after I've passed. Upanai lo yera'u, you will not see my face. Very, very difficult psukim, even in terms of just pashut pshat. Chazal make it even more difficult. They talk about kesher shel tefillin. Hashem is wearing tefillin, and Moshe Rabbeinu saw the knots of the tefillin in the back of the head, the back of the rosh. Ein lanu chelik b'nistaros. But the Chassam Sofer says that this is in fact an answer to Moshe Rabbeinu's question. Moshe Rabbeinu's question is, I don't understand what's going on. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, V'ra'isa es achorai, after I've passed through, after everything has happened, and you're looking in hindsight at the time of the Geula, then you will understand what everything was. Upanai, but as it is coming towards you, lo yera'u, that cannot be discerned by a human being. That is the nature of our limitations. In fact, even the book of Iyov, according to one man Diamar in the first parak of Baba Basra, Iyov itself was Lahayav Laniver, it may not have been an actual person. And according to one man Diamar, the author of the book of Iyov may be none other than Moshe Rabbeinu himself. So Moshe Rabbeinu again is grappling with the issue of the Hester that exists in the world. And at the end of the Sefer of Iyov, written Baruch HaKodesh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to Iyov and says to Iyov, you didn't do anything wrong, Iyov. Your friends are wrong. They're telling you this is happening because you did these Averos. I got good news for you. You didn't do anything wrong. You're fine. But in many ways, that makes the kasha much worse. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have told Iyov, you got this because, then Iyov has an answer. If Hashem says, but Iyov, you did nothing wrong, don't worry about it. So the kasha is, why? That becomes a real kasha. So why? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, again, to be marich in the book of Iyov is beyond our time right now. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu essentially shows Iyov the wonders of the world. It's a travelogue. He shows him snow and ice and planets and stars and mountain goats that release their offspring exactly at the right point, because if it's an inch away, it'll fall down the mountain, etc. You might go, Niflais Habayre. He shows him Niflais Habayre. And he says to Iyov, there's even a pasuk that says, if you could do a better job than me, I'll let you take over. You think you could do better? And Iyov says at the end of that whole story, Nichamti. Nichamti has two translations, but both are correct here. Either I'm comforted, you've given me nechama, or Nichamti, I regret all that I said, all of my tinus, all of my arguments. I have charata. Vayinochem Hashem, Iyov is nischaret. But the question becomes, why is Iyov comforted? And why is he nischaret? Hashem didn't answer the question fundamentally. In other words, Hashem, the friends were trying to give him a teretz. You're nenash because of your averos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, it's not a teretz. You don't have averos. So what's the teretz? So Hashem shows him mountain goats and stars. Again, ultimately, the answer is that he's telling Iyov, it's not shaykh for a human being to understand the ways of Hashem. But know that I'm here. Know that I exist. Know that I'm with you. Know that as you go through the struggle of the darkness, you're not alone. And I'm here to give you chizuk and encouragement, even in the Hester Panim. So the Eibishter is not giving a teretz to the kasha, but the kasha itself is no longer a mafriya to a person if he feels the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence. During so much of the year, in the world that we live in, we don't see the open miracle. And we see Eilam Kimin Hago Noheg, and we see tragedies, and we see tzaras in Eretz Yisrael, in Chutz La'aretz, throughout the world, in our own neighborhood here. And one wonders, has Hashem abandoned us? Does Hashem care? Purim is that great message, that even when there's Hester Panim, both in the sense of things going on normally and in the sense of even the deeper Hester of adversity and suffering, one feels the comforting presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in that way, that is the real simcha of Purim. The Chayav Adam Lefsume is not so much to get intoxicated and lie on the floor in one's vomit. One would not necessarily say that that is a spiritually elevated madrega. But to reach a level of simcha where you go beyond chitzonius and you understand that in the etzem panemius of the Bria, there is a God that loves us. There is a God that cares about us. There is a God that will not abandon us, that will take care of us. B'ezras Hashem, some things don't change. Thousands of years ago, there was a crazy guy in Iran that wanted to destroy the Jewish people. In the year 5776, there are still Mishugaim in Iran, same country, that want to destroy the Jewish people. And as Purim has been a Zman of Yeshua and Geula for Klal Yisrael, may it be a Zman of Geula and Yeshua from all of the enemies of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.